Good morning and welcome. My name is Frankie Marquez, and I am the 2020 and 2021 president of the Design Leadership Alliance. And I would like to welcome you to the second annual DLA Symposium. After last year's success in person, we had hoped to bring everyone together again for this year's symposium. Unfortunately, due to the current circumstances, we are hosting this year's symposium virtual. I can promise you it will not be your typical virtual symposium. Let me introduce you to the Texas Tech College of Architecture Design Leadership Alliance, DLA. The Design Leadership Alliance, DLA, was founded in 2018. The charter members were James P. Williamson, Dean of the College of Architecture, Derek Wade, Assistant Dean for External Affairs, Deidre Odell, Scholarship Event Coordinator and Alumni Relations, Mark Criswell, Guide Architecture, Dan Hart, PSC, and myself with 3 Design. The Design Leadership DLA purpose and mission. The purpose of the Design Leadership Alliance is to be a compelling, vibrant, sustainable, and engaging body that produces and provides a significant contribution to the College of Architecture and to the profession. We provide a platform to bridge the state of architecture between academia and the profession, elevate the image, reputation of the Texas Tech College of Architecture at the regional, national, and global levels to increase cultural diversity of dialogue within the college, creating a culture of investments in the College of Architecture and design profession, initiating a mechanism for fundraising to meet 4 priority goals for the College of Architecture. These goals are to renovate the existing College of Architecture building or work towards a new building, increase the funding and scholarships, assist the development of endowed professorships, travel, sponsorship to support international research-based studios. Now that we've told you about our purpose and our mission, let me introduce you to the 2020-2021 Dean Circle members. Past President, Dan Hart. Current Vice President is David Pierce. Kelly Whitney is Secretary. Randy Herring is Treasurer. Adam Reed is Nomination and Membership. Lenora Ask, Professional Exposure and Recruiting. Kristen Ledette, Marketing and Public Relations. Stephen Picard, Awards. John Martin, Academic Professional Partnership. David Ladowick, Alumni Relations. John Zabsky, Finance and Scholarship. I would like to spotlight several committees working over the past year. The first is the DLA Student Development Committee. In conjunction with the College of Architecture, they recently held the Next Step Prep that included workshops, keynote speakers, mock interviews, and interview document reviews. These workshops covered subjects pertaining to do's and don'ts of resumes, cover letters, and portfolio preparation. Students were allowed to participate in a day event mock interviews held by DLA Student Development Committee members and others for the design industries. Speakers offer insight to architectural careers, development, covering multiple topics, including graphic design and layout paths of practice and firm life. The concluding segment of events was an interview document review where 40 students submitted portfolios, resumes, cover letters for review and feedback. From the pool of students' work reviewed, the DLA Student Development Committee members selected students' work for recognition based on strength of content, organization, graphic impact, and content. This year's recognized individuals are Mi Leanne Koyafu Lot, Strong Individual Brand, Outstanding Cover Letter, Carissa Perez, Outstanding Portfolio, Cecilia Garcia, Outstanding Resume. The second committee I would like to recognize is the Awards Committee. Every year, they exert an unbelievable amount of time selecting the Kleinschmidt Award and the Distinguished Alumni Award. The Kleinschmidt Award was first presented in 2000, and the Distinguished Alumni Award was presented in 1982. This year's recipient is Dr. Saif Haq, PhD, Kleinschmidt Award. Jim C. Kohler, FAIA, Distinguished Alumni Award. You can see some of their bodies of work in some of the PowerPoint presentations during the event. Our feature panel topic is Design for Manufacturing and Assembly, DFMA. The panel is moderated by Texas Tech's College of Architecture alumni Chris Tisdale of Ruckus Innovation Consulting. The panelists include content experts with various perspectives in the space. We are also thrilled that Amy Marks of Autodesk is part of our panelist group and will be providing a unique and challenging perspective on this topic. We will also have a case study on how these theories are put into the action. Our presenter will be Randy Herring, Senior Vice President of TD Industries. Please sit back and enjoy our presentation, and guns up.
All right, good afternoon, and welcome to the second annual Design Leadership Alliance Symposium, hosted by the College of Architecture at Texas Tech University. Guns up for those who are alumni. I am a humble servant of Texas Tech University and a happy grad, and some might say even a recovering architect, still very close to my heart, but I'm not practicing anymore. But I love to come back and talk architecture, talk technology, talk innovation. And I want to welcome some panelists today who are all of those things and much more. First, we've got Amy Marks from Autodesk. We've got Randy Herring from TD Industries. We've got Sean Studzinski from Modular Design Plus, and Sora Key from Texas Tech University. Welcome, panelists, and let's jump into our topics today of digital twin and design for manufacturing and assembly. So, Sean, let me just start by asking you to introduce yourself, the company, what you guys do, and give me a little bit of your perspective on digital twin, design for manufacturing, a little bit of both, one or the other, frankly, and talk about where you work in the industry and even how you work in the industry along that logistics chain between high design, early design, and occupancy.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. Like Chris said, my name is Sean Studzinski. I'm president of Modular Design Plus. I'm an architect of 23 years. I'm also a graduate of Texas Tech College of Architecture. Very proud, guns up. So I'm happy to be here in the symposium hosted by Texas Tech University, my alma mater. I won't mention Patrick Mahomes' experience in the Super Bowl, but I'm sure we all saw that. So a little bit about Modular Design Plus and DFMA and twin digital twins. We use it throughout the entire gamut. So Modular Design Plus is a integrated process all the way throughout the construction and design process. And I think that's something that's very unique about what we provide. We have combined the integration of architectural design and engineering from the get-go, working with the architects and engineers of record, integrating throughout that entire design process to maximize and find the efficiencies that are going to be taken advantage of throughout the fabrication and manufacturing, all the way through the installation of it. And I think that's something that's very unique with Modular Design Plus, is that we don't just stop at the fabrication and provide a product and provide something that will ultimately be installed by a GC or something. We actually guide it, and we have the DFMA, but we add the extra touch of what we call design for installation, where we actually provide a guidebook through the process of the installation. DFMA, prefabricated modular design, and all of that is fairly new in the U.S. commercial industry. And so there's actually a lot of GCs and subcontractors out there who don't fully understand it, don't fully understand the process and what's entwined in that. And so we actually help the designers as well as the constructors all the way through that process and providing guidance so that the estimates, the bids, and the efficiency is found all the way through the process, not just in what we provide and providing a product out there.
That's amazing, Sean. That I want to come back to the guidebook that you spoke to, because that's something that I don't see regularly in the industry. And it sounds like a real differentiator of not just providing an awesome, incredible product, but also how to put it together as a best practice. That's really interesting. Randy, let me turn to you and ask you about, again, where do you sit in the digital twin, the DFMA world? Where does TD Industries play, especially as a major subcontractor that is doing a ton of work with a lot of great professionals across, Texas, let alone the US? What's your perspective on the industry? What's your perspective on the technologies?
Well, I think the industry is changing quite a bit. When you look at the future of construction in the next 15 years, it's going to be completely different from the previous 15 years. But as TD Industries, we are mechanical plumbing contractors and we're in the state of Texas, Arizona, and we branch up to Colorado for some multifamily. We're a 75-year-old company, and we've had a manufacturing shop for about 40 years, give or take a few years. And so we've always manufactured product for our own job sites, and we're going to continue to do that. We have a team of VDC or BIM designers, about 60 in a company-wide center of excellence that really work hard for our own jobs to design for manufacturing and assembly. You know, how can we look at the product that we're going to install in the field and design it in a way to optimize fabrication so that we can move man hours off of the job site and into manufacturing where it's less risky, where you can have more certainty. But as we look to the future, you know, we do that for ourselves, but as we look to the future, we're saying, how can we scale and do it for more, right? As we're seeing serial owners and, you know, other owners want construction delivered in a different way, how can we be a part of their supply chain to do that, right? How can we help owners that are interested in building their buildings in Legos or modular type sections? How can we build that for them and be a part of their supply chain to ship it to wherever their new facility is going? So, you know, I would say that that is a big deal, you know, going from, like I said, the past 15 years forward, is I think there's going to be more and more of, you know, certainty, need for certainty and cost and schedule, and you can get that through fabrication. But, you know, the most important thing is you have to have DFMA. You have to be able to design a model for manufacturing and assembly. The model, more than ever, is so important. The model is what we're going to fabricate off of. It has to be 100% right. It can't just be for coordination purposes. It's actually what we build off of. So really how I'm looking at it in the future is, you know, model-led, technology-driven workflows for sure, from model to manufacture.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. In my former career working with Gary Technologies, it was amazing to see the quote high architecture of Gary going from literal napkin sketch to, you know, very creative architectural minds to CNC machines to, you know, on-site put together very much like Legos. So looking, you know, away from it, standing away from it, it looks like sort of ordered chaos. But when you get up close to it, right, it's a module that we can sort of wrap our brains around and build architecture from. So it's an amazing future that I think we're looking at. So
yeah,
sort of.
Well, I was just going to add to that, Chris, is just, you know, that creativity of Gary, right, on the skin of the building. And but then also say, what kind of modular components can we assemble, you know, for the building, right? And so you can, it doesn't matter the type, you can take that concept and take it to a Gary type construction for sure. Absolutely,
absolutely. Sora, let me come to you next and just ask you about, you know, where you sit at Texas Tech, where you sit in sort of the education of our future architects and creatives that are going to be working with, as you might imagine, digital twins. They'll be designing for manufacturing and assembly. And just give me your opinion on what that looks like for the future and your background and where you sit with Texas Tech.
Hi, this is Soraki from Texas Tech College of Architecture, and I'm an assistant professor at the college who's specialized in advanced design and computation. So before I joined Texas Tech, I used to be an architect, practicing architect, and I did my PhD degree in computational design, which involves with software and hardware tool development. So what I see, like this is my personal opinion, which is very relevant with this the theme of our symposium, is like when all this new kind of technology come in, they already came in to our education industry and the profession all at the same time. Like, for example, AR, VR, you know, machine learning and automation in design and manufacturing all at the same time. My focus and interest and questions altogether is more on the education side and the methodology side of how we design, how we actually produce our design in real life with actual materials, and how can we deal with this actual process of designing and making. So this is actually the kind of questions and interest I have with the theme of this symposium is a little broader. So that's where I sit in currently. And I'm also, curious to see what everybody else, especially from industry, is, so I can teach my students a little better.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. So let me come to you, Amy, and ask you, as you probably know, many years ago in my career, I was the director of building information modeling for the state of Texas, and this was probably 2005. So early on, roughly in that sort of BIM arc, and it was sort of pre-digital twin, and it was definitely pre-DFMA, especially at a mature level, but worked closely with Autodesk and other technology, professionals at the time, trying to, see what the future was going to be and see what the future might hold for us. And now I'm excited to hear where you sit within Autodesk and your background, both on the digital twin side and the DFMA side, where you see that future sort of happening now. What does it look like from your perspective today? But just as importantly, what does it look like going tomorrow, a year from now, 5 years now, 10 years from now, especially with the advent of COVID and the digital transformation that might have had happened for some of us, overnight.
Yeah, that was a lot. I'm going to try to address all that. That's how's the world going to change? What are you, Amy Marks, going to do about it? How will Autodesk support us? First, let's just say you just said a lot of words all in there, right? And although I'm not representing digital twin on this particular slide, you'll see it on the next one. But you first got to say, you're saying DFMA, which for me is an enabler, a process enabler. It's just the design choices you make to enable things like prefabrication. That's all it is. It doesn't mean prefabrication. It doesn't mean digitization. It doesn't mean computational design that leads to generative. Purely DFMA are the choices you make as a designer for ease of manufacturing and assembly. The problem is, and by the way, this is the house that I see built that we use here at Autodesk at the moment. And it's really it's the application of manufacturing techniques to the built environment. The physicality lives up here in the continuum. There's no hierarchy. I love that we have a gentleman sitting there with the module behind him. A module sometimes is the best application. Sometimes it's the worst application for prefab, depending on what you're trying to do. There's no hierarchy, right? There's tons of single and multi-trade and advanced building products that are great as well as volumetric mods. We have to think about how we're going to apply advanced building techniques like robotics and automation and additive manufacturing. And then you look down to my technology enablers, and that's really where IoT and the digitized supply chain that will productize. When I say productize, I mean move past prefabrication, actually. I mean, there's a difference between prefab and products, right? And I think when those are enabled through IoT, we're going to be able to, and things like computational design, as the last speaker said, you're going to be able to use those to really truly get certainty around the data and start getting predictive data, hopefully that we can share in the cloud across. And for us, at Autodesk, we talk a lot about the fact this is all converging at the same time, not just industries and process and technology. That's why we need this stuff, right? But I like to talk about change. Digital twins, I see digital twins with an S because there's more than one, right? Depending on the use case that you're talking about. We can't actually change things and get to that place of the future. You said, how are we all going to get there, right? And I was like, I know what the future looks like. We all just talked about it. It sounds great. Everything's productized and we have digital twins and we're able to understand buildings as breathing, living, adapting things that can be good for reuse in the circular economy. We all know what the vision looks like, right? And we're all pretty dissatisfied with what today is. I think the thing we're missing are first concrete steps of action, and that we need to overcome resistance. And my last slide looks like this. I just brought a couple today to move people to action. We know that we want all these things, right? And we know that we need a strategy for that. It really does start with some foundational skills. You're talking about digital twins, and we have people that haven't even got off paper sometimes. We're talking about design for manufacturing and assembly techniques, and we don't even, I have to argue sometimes, not too often anymore, like, why are we prefabricating things? Why should we move to it? It's like we have to kind of get over that. And if you don't have those foundational skills of, especially not just like, look, you have some automation. I could probably see in the back of your factory. I can't implement a 6-axis arm robot to a company that's a level 4 piece of automation and machinery if they're at level 1 for readiness for that, right? Like they have no culture, no people, no process around how to even like adapt to that kind of methodology, or even how to digitize things, get it to digital twin. We all have to recognize that there are assessments and foundational tools around things like manufacturing, robotics, technology, that culture that we all need so that we can productize. And that's really where it starts for digital twins. You cannot get to where we want to be with digital twins unless you think of it building with digitized products with an enabled connected supply chain. So this is what I warn everybody about digital twins. If you only put information of intent up front in your digital twin, it will be just like when you do geometric shapes that don't actually get built later. And we need to not do the same mistakes that got made up front in the past with different types of technology. We truly have to empower productization, not just from a physicality of the products I mentioned in prefab, but also for workflows, for data reusability, for coding, for things like that. We have to move to a productization mindset. We have to digitize them using engineered data to get both connected processes and automation. Obviously, it has to live in the cloud, and it needs to work on a connected platform. Autodesk doesn't just have products, portfolio products. We have a connected platform of an ecosystem of competitors and partners and us and everybody that's in there, because that's better for the end user. We need to make sure these are in the cloud so we can optimize them for things like digital twins and also generative design, optioneering, and understanding how these buildings actually work, so we can reuse these things, not just the physicality of them, but both digital reuse and physical reuse, because we are now filling our landfills at a ridiculous rate, not just of physical waste, but the amount of digital waste that goes on in our ecosystem is immense. We pay people on effort, not value. We have lots of silos. And you really can't get to the future you just said without redefining the way in which we conceptualize, design, can build and manufacture and operate buildings. I always warn people, don't talk about digital twins like they're digital as-builts. Like if you're at that point, you miss the point. You know what I mean? I think that's the only way we get to transformation, is to first recognize where we are now. And it's almost like if you don't recognize where you are now and get the foundational skills, you can't. It's really great to have the vision, but we can't get there. And it's very and that's, by the way, interestingly enough, that's why we have resistance personas. Most of the time, it's not that they don't want to change and they can't see themselves in the future. That's part of it. But the other part is they're frustrated. They want that and they have no idea how to get there.
Amen. That's fabulous. It's a terrific foundation, and I appreciate that. The thing that I want to touch on with everybody here is the concept of value, because you said, we don't pay necessarily for value. Sora, let me come to you real quick, because, based on what you just heard Amy lay out from sort of foundational and where we're not necessarily paying for value, and digital twin is foundational, but we have to really get it right before we can build on top of that. How would you react to that? Those slides and that information? Do you agree, disagree? What is your perspective?
Well, I totally agree with those short, sweet slide, 3-page slide that says this digital twin and sharing our ideas and outcomes all at the same time using this digital media. Also include our process and thoughts that are not done yet. And most of the time, people are really, scared and afraid of showing their, half-baked ideas, when those half-baked ideas are totally creative and it can inspire many other peoples. So I think, we are all, also, shooting for the actual manufacturing and everything, the methodology of making things in real life. But this also needs to include the process, our thinking process, and the creative, steps of how we evolve our ideas, how we develop our ideas. So this is also related to the design process, the manufacturing process, the methodology, but it's actually about pretty much everything. So we're trying to share everything we have towards this making and designing of something until the end of the process, which is a long way to go.
Well, I love that you said computational design, by the way. I'm a big fan of computational design because it drives generative design, right? And so when we always hear people in our ecosystem say, bill of materials. And I'm like, what about bill of process? What about how we make it? What about sustainability outcome embedded in the actual design of that and the outcomes we're looking at for that in the framework? And if you have computational design, by the way, a lot of things you said about how we feel about the space, what we think about the space, you don't have time for that as an architect these days. And let me tell you why, Sora, because you're drawing fire stairs and you're doing wall panels and you're making things that have somewhat no impact on what the end result of that user's experiences and the feelings within the building. And if you use computational design, something that I love to productize, once you productize like the manufacturer that we have here today, if he actually productizes, I can say just like a generator, right? That's a productized thing we use in buildings. No architect spends time thinking, I think today I'm going to make a Kohler 217.5. They don't. They just design around that product and then they spend their time elsewhere. If we can productize pieces and parts that allow you to set the parameters of generative through computational design, you'd free yourself up to have so much more time to spend on the aesthetics, the end user experience, that the things that they're most afraid of with digital transformation and IC and prefabrication are actually their freedom, not their handcuffs. And I think we have to teach the younger generation who embrace machine learning, AI, and tech to recognize that they use technology to free themselves to do better, not to bind them up. You know what I mean?
I think, Amy, I'd agree with that. When you look at the modular, and you can see one of our units behind me here, is that, it's often identified as that itself is the product, and it's not. It's actually a design that's designed around productized systems, like you said, to take that freedom, give that freedom back to the architects, give that freedom back to the engineers to allow them to focus on more of the key parts of the building, the key aspects of it. This is a hotel room. This hotel room is repeated 140 times in the building that's going into. There's no reason for them to spend time drawing each one of those. You can say it's productized, but yet working with us, it allows them the freedom to still design that, and we will manufacture, productize, if you will. Sometimes I don't like that word so much just because I'm afraid that it's going to be, it gets honed into that, you can only do boxes, or you can only do this product or that product. So, I'd like to have a different word for that in a way that still, they understand that it still starts with the freedom of design, but then takes away, it gives them back that freedom to focus on the more important parts of the building. And when you talk about digital computation, you talk about generative design, is something we use a lot of, simply because I don't have to repeat that. I don't have to have my engineers and architects in-house redraw that box, 20 times, 40 times across that building. It's really something that can just be recreated and still is going to meet all the demands and all the requirements of the functionality of that facility.
The difference between what you said and I said is I want to take it one level higher. Once you worked out your DFMA principles for this building on the products you make with the designs this group wants, you're not you necessarily, but oftentimes the people that are manufacturing today in our space are fabricating. They're doing it for the first, they may never make that hotel room ever again just like it. They may make it once. We make a lot of snowflakes, right? Because we're taking people's designs and we're prefabricating them the best way we can based on what they want. The flip to that is that if you can productize, don't think that everything has to be standard, by the way. There's like a range of generators, that are like 50 generators, but it allows you them to take pieces and parts and apply it with ultimate optioneering. Think if every facade was productized through computational design, and every system and MEP rack and every wall panel had computational design with a standard fluid amount of products. You could combine those for the best possible outcomes for the best hotel room that you're going to then replicate 140 times. But right now you kind of have to do that by hand because you don't necessarily have it productized with computational design so that any hotel operator can come to you and get whatever they want based on, and it becomes different based on parameters they set in the generative process that can result in an operating digital twin with those pieces and parts to then have living, breathing data coming back and forth from the building to the operator all the time in real time. And also up front in the choices they make. Imagine if they could make choices and set higher level parameters on carbon, embedded carbon versus something else, because that's important to them. And another operator doesn't really care about that. So they can put cost as the parameter that is weighted. We don't really have that ability because we're constantly making and designing snowflakes, even if there are 140 of them at one time in the factory. You know what I mean? I want, and you're my hope, by the way. You're
my introduction. We're a little different than that. We actually have architects and engineers in-house that work with the architects and engineers of record to do exactly what you just said, is to replicate, to create, to find those efficiencies, to maximize those efficiencies, not just in the box that you see behind me, but in the overall elements that go into making that box, all the pieces, and then take that a step further to actually looking at the overall building, identifying the bits and pieces that can be modularized beyond what they might have actually thought of. And a lot of that is done through generative design and our library of elements that we have that go into that. But then we take it one step further to the contractors, and we provide a design for installation guidance that will allow even the contractors and subcontractors to understand what we're doing and what they're doing. I think there's not enough clarification in the industry to where when general contractors look at it and they say, okay, we're bidding on this and we got modular, they're going to take this 100,000 square foot building and they're going to bid it like a 100,000 square foot building, when in actuality, they may only be
20,000,
be installing, 15 to 20,000 square foot on site. The rest of it is being built in my factory.
By the way, we haven't met, but I used to own a volumetric steel and concrete modular manufacturing company. So I'm with you. I agree with you. The difference with what you said though, is that you have to have those architects that lives in their heads and in some library piece of parts. I want it to live in a connected platform so anyone can use those with computational design to buy your product from anywhere. You don't need those. One day, those architects that are really good at what you do, I know I have them in my shop. They won't exist anymore. I'm 50 this year. I can't stick around that much longer in the space. I'd like what's in my head to live in the tech so that you can apply what Sora's students are going to apply to it in computational and digital twins and get what's in my head and make it 1,000,000 times better with 1,000,000 different infinite number of options that you can still fabricate, that everybody understands the assembly methodology, because that bill of process, even for the assembly methodology, lives within the computational design. Then you won't be counting on that person. You'll be counting on the tech to communicate that. And I think that's a big difference.
I will disagree on one aspect, is I never want to take out that human factor in it. I think
course, like no one ever does.
The AI, then you just get that repetitive nature. And so I think as a teacher, you'll certainly understand that as a design teacher. And so there's always got to be that aspect. I'm an architect too, Amy. I don't know.
You set the parameters. That's the people part of it. You get to be the master architect, the empowered architect that you can't be right now. That's the people aspect you get to do. All the places and pieces, like you just said, there, you don't have to worry about the 140 rooms. Those guys get to do the beautiful lobby and the staircase and the entry and the portico and all those beautiful things that are not productized out of your shop. Let them do those things they want. I never think take the people out, by the way, ever. I think the people are, by the way, I truly think in the world we're talking about, that Sora's talking, she's going to be teaching empowered architects. That's the only word for it. They will be enabled and empowered architects, more so than today.
But I think, Amy, one of your point is valid, that, if you look at the AEC industry and especially the EPC industry, who are doing, mods in a different way, probably differently defined, but in heavy industrial space, right? The average age of some of the largest EPCs is in the 50s, right? And so, and it skews probably younger in AEC and probably younger maybe in the creative space of architects and engineers in AEC. But it is a valid concern for our industry to know that there's a lot of knowledge that will be fishing in about 10 years. And they'll do some work with us for fun, but it's not their day-to-day, right? So being able to have
shopping. I'm
shopping,
not fishing, but that's good.
I'll be fly fishing at some point. But you're right. Sora is it's like, the Star Wars, you're our only hope, Sora, right now. But you're one of those big hopes, right? But I think the problem that Sora has and Texas Tech and many of the universities has is not necessarily just because we built that baseball field, they're not necessarily coming, right? So those empowered architects will be few and precious. Those engineers may be few and precious. Those contractors may be few and precious in the future. Randy, I want to pick on you for just a second, because I know you've built a tour de force inside TDI around, VDC and manufacturing and the combination thereof. I really would love to get your perspective on Sean and Amy's conversation.
So back on your question with TD Industries and, being a mechanical specialty contractor, right? We have a big engineering design build offering. We have a big mechanical offering. I think I spoke to it earlier. We have over 60 VDC designers that we use in a center of excellence throughout the organization. And really what we're looking at and what the future is saying, we've been manufacturers for a long time. How do we manufacture better? How do we work efficiencies into the design process? How do we standardize what we're building so we can use it again and again and again, despite the building, despite the design and the engineer, because there's so many different engineers. It's even better if we have the design on it, if we're the actual engineers. But if not, we still have standards that are the basic fundamental building blocks of what we do that we can use over and over again. And so as we've designed those different standards or those modules, we can use them in our Revit drawings, right? We can streamline the amount of time that it takes our designers to complete the model by engineering those efficiencies of standards in. And one of the fundamental things that we needed to do to get where we need to be is our database. A couple of years ago, we created our database. It's what we estimate off of, it's what we design off of, it's what we build off of. So it's one standard database that talks throughout our system, which, construction is like the dirtiest thing out there, not just physically dirty, but our data is so dirty. We can estimate a $100 million hospital for a mechanical and plumbing system, but does it match what we built? And can you ever tell? And so that's what's exciting about technology and data, is to be able to say, I estimated it with the same database that I built it with. I estimated it with the same standard and modules that I'm building it with, right? And so finally, we're starting to get some clarity and some certainty. And with that, is the proof that you need, because, contractors, and I don't know as much architects, but contractors for sure, they're set in the ways that they've always done things. It's gotten them to where they've gotten. They just don't realize that the next 15 years is going to be completely different than their 40-year career. So you have to win them over by proof of certainty, proof of cost, proof of schedule. And I think that's what we're working on through our technology, through our database, through our manufacturing expertise, is to sell our internal customers, all the men and women, trades, the men and women that are out in the field installing it, but also external customers to be a part of supply chains that we've never been a part of before, direct with owners, right? And so I think the future is a lot different, and I think it's all model-driven, technology-driven, but model to manufacture, right?
So let me pick up on that thread, and I'd like to hear from everybody else on this too. So what's Randy's sort of value pitch for, this next paradigm, everything that Amy described, from sort of foundational to, oh my God, we've got, genius architects, genius engineers, genius contractors. And oh, by the way, we've got a tour de force of robots helping us do all this. We've got digital twins that are perfect. And we've got, a productization where everybody can add their creativity, and beautiful, architecture, design, construction comes out the other end, right? That's the nirvana, right, that we're thinking of. But what's that value statement, or what's the value that we need to, as sort of an industry, be talking about now to get those people, whether they're a naysayer or they're a believer, on board and moving in that right direction?
As an industry, we're less broken than we used to be, but we're so fundamentally broken. 8 years ago, I was doing a large hospital in Houston. When I used to be on the construction side of our business, I asked the general contractor if they could leave an opening in the building for me so I could get some large scale, probably med gas head walls or, something in that I needed a bigger space to get in. And they said, no, we're not going to let you do that, And, whereas 3 months ago, I was sitting in an interview for another hospital in Austin, and the general contractor wanted as a pre-interview, and they came and they sat down and said, we know you're a fabricator. Every mechanical is a fabricator. What do you do that's different?
What? They did not say that.
They did. And they want to see how much more value can they get out of us, right? So in 8 years, I've come from, no, you can't do any prefab. I'm not going to let you ruin my schedule, right?
Yeah.
Perceived, to, okay, so every mechanical has a shop. How are you going to do that, right? And from that time to this year, I can tell you that there's a whole new class of people that I'm hiring. We have a construction technology team that I guarantee you a lot of manufacturers didn't use to, and contractors didn't used to have, right? So it's bringing that construction technology expertise in to assist with our BIM designers and, you know, our tradesmen and women in the field and our manufacturing. So it's a whole lot different than it used to be, and it's going to be exponential going forward into the future. I mean, and that's fundamentally why I've shifted onto from the construction side of the business over 25 years, right, into over construction technology and manufacturing, because I think that's where the massive change is going to come from. And it's exciting to me to see something that's so broken start to get fixed.
Yeah, I'm going to share one more slide just because what you said is so interesting. So I always show this new possible, like what the roles look like. And by the way, Randy, you should have turned back and said to that general contractor, I should be asking you how good of a system, like a systems integrator you are, because the last time I worked with a contractor, you guys wouldn't give me a hole in the side of the building. So I don't want to work for any general contractor that doesn't know how to be a systems integrator at this point. So that's what I would have said back. Now, interestingly enough, so I have contractors, not prefab actually at the moment. You can tell it's so noisy. But right now, we are in those traditional personas. And the one thing, Chris, I want to correct you, like not in a bad way, but like, we're not an industry. We're not. Right. She's in the mechanical, electrical, like in the MEP industry. And like, he's in the modular industry up there like right now. And like someone else is in the architecture. We're an ecosystem of a bunch of industries that have varying value propositions. And that's where the disconnect comes from, right? So it's like, you've basically got to have guys willing to, either they're going to be willing to give it up. Like I know great engineers like KHL, and those guys have said, we only engineer now for prefabricated products. We don't draw things anymore that get chucked in the trash. The president there had told me, he's like, we had to burn our business to the ground and give up fake value for something we did that was useless so that we could build a business back on value. And that's what you're going to have to do. I actually heard a big general contractor say the other day, we're going to have to like figure out that our value isn't in writing scopes and beating up subs and getting better pricing anymore. We better figure out if we're moving to 50% of basically everything going to be done in a prefabricated world, right? The rest of it, by the way, has to accept that. And we've got to understand how to be integrators of those pieces and parts. So this is what I think it does actually change to look like if I had to take out my crystal ball, like there's no more silos anymore. And there are a lot of vertical integrators. Randy, you don't need that general contractor. Like you said, right now, a lot of the people are going direct with the owners to the MEP super subs because they are not providing value between the owner and people like you as you productize, and they can put it right up front in the playbook for design. So like they have a small opportunity right now to show their value in that space, or they will be wiped out of the face of the earth. And I think, you know, you're talking about I just came from an owners conference where I was talking to the serial owners, the guys that have big geo programs that need certainty, that need consistency. They are driving this with changes to their contracts and procurement and their playbook. And they're taking more control over the process and dictating how they want their partners that they work with and how they want to be treated for design and construct, because they need certainty, right? And so it looks different in the future state. That's the good news. Everybody makes products, Randy. That's good, right? And then systems integrators have to exist inclusive of you. You might not need that partner to integrate on site for you because you know how to do it yourself for the big pieces and parts you're already doing. It's a much smaller leap for you to be the integrator of your own pieces and parts, for them to understand your pieces and parts, right? And then for Autodesk, like the part that really truly is missing, and I look to my friends in education for this, I'm actually doing I think it's 12-week course at Columbia that we put together from Autodesk, and it's available to other colleges at some point. But I'm teaching about things like machine learning and AI and IC and the MEP as the new manufacturer in the ecosystem, and things like platform and convergence. We have a whole course like that, all videotape, that's going to be this spring, so we can take it to other colleges. Because truly our goal is to be an enabled platform for you. You shouldn't have to get to the front of the process to sell those products. Your database needs to be connected on Forge to the Autodesk products so that those designers, when they design, can real time pull down your products and understand the factory capacity and the lead times on real time, like all the time. We have to be able to get to that future. And so Autodesk has to be, by the way, everybody laughs at my red shoe. Yeah, I got flowers today, so it's behind there. But like, I always say, this is my red shoe. I bought it on an enabled connected platform, and my shoe's an 8.5 only because it recognizes what an 8.5 looks like. And we had to standardize and productize on it. And just like generative, when I bought this on the platform called Amazon.com, it also said, you should buy that shoe, this pants, and this shirt, right? And I put the parameters in and said what I wanted, and it gave me this shoe. And it gave me a lot of options of shoes to the point we made before. But without a connected IC ecosystem, without you productizing, Randy, or our modular friend up there productizing, without that baseline foundational work and us enabling it through the technology and students that actually understand and value that, and owners asking for that, this is the problem why we don't change so quickly, right? We have to give up waste. People have to burn some of their business to the ground. They have to know where new value is. And owners that are driving this have to demand change with their pocketbooks. You know what I mean? They have to demand it. Mm-hmm. And we have to be there to support them. You know what I mean? And Randy, good on you. Again, you know, I love you guys anyway from the Advancing Prefab show. So for sure, like, you guys have it right.
Well, you know, it's always a work in progress, right? And just trying to be able to, you know, what's next? How can we improve our efficiency? Because we all chose a really risky business to be in, right? I mean, it's extremely, extremely risky. So how do we de-risk it, right? And I think that's what everybody's doing right now. And how do we fix a process that's been broken? And, you know, the bigger the module, the better, like Sean.
Sean, it looks like I know you came off mute. I could feel the passion of jumping in that conversation. So what's your perspective on this?
Well, I agree with a lot of it. I think again, at the end of the day, the digitizing and all of that is still just a tool. You know, I mean, I use Amazon like that, where I go and I put in parameters. It doesn't always find my solution. You know, for me, my personal passion is cars. I love rebuilding cars and doing all that. And I can find a lot of parts on there. But 90% of my parts, I got to go to Summit to get my parts, you know? And so it's really a matter of knowing what you're wanting and then having that flexibility. I think we can even look at, you know, I'm going to disagree with the automation. I think there's a certain amount of automation that is required in that process, but I think it also has to be limited. Even Elon Musk, you know, he didn't make profit for over a decade in building the electric cars. And he finally came out last year and said, I had too much automation. You know, I didn't have the flexibility that I needed. I like to change my things a lot. I like to go in there and adjust them. And that's why he couldn't make a profit, because he was constantly making it better. He was constantly improving it. And every time he had to do that, he had to take his automation down for a month or so and reprogram everything and redo all that. And so when we built our factory, we built it differently. We have some automation in there, but we also have a lot of manual labor that allows for that flexibility, because I think at the end of the day, we're humans. We are humans, and we're going to be humans. You know, this owner is going to be different from that owner. Now, they may have a lot of similarities that we can reproduce and we can productize, but I think, you know, for the majority part of it, we have to keep some of that flexibility in there, some of that human aspect, some of that mind in there. And so I just don't want to go too far down that road to where everything is just automated and we have a bunch of robots spitting out this stuff, because that's really, I don't know that we would ever fully be there in construction. I think the integrated process is number one on top of the list. So I think, you know, at the end of the day, though, as we look into this and moving forward with this, is that we really have to create that flexibility and create that. And so an integrated process is number one. And I think, yes, that can be led by the data, by the information, by, you know, the reuse of that information, and then doing it, you know, better each time. And that's what we're currently, you know, learning from, is each one of these projects that we complete, each one of them that we produce, we do the next one a little bit better. We make it a little bit more efficient. We have a little bit less waste. We have or a little bit, you know, less of that's going into our landfills. We have a little bit more sustainability.
We have to elevate our understanding beyond the physicality. That's why I came here. You have to get past that. You have to get to the reusability of the data. We have to start measuring what we don't have to draw, not what we are drawing. We have to understand how computers, and that helps us so that you can still do things with craftsmanship by hand, and there's still people in there, but we shouldn't be coding everything as if we have to code it the first time, like it's the first time we've ever done it. We shouldn't have to look at process. But I always say there's the art of sound, and then you can buy Sonos. If you want the art of sound, my consultant that makes a $300 sound system for a really nice house, he doesn't make speaker wire. He still uses process and product for that. Just saying, like, you can have both.
So let me pick on Sora, because I know I can see the passion in her hand raising too, but let me ask you this, Sora, you know, you are actually turning out the product of people, right? You're turning out the product of new professionals in the workspace that are going to bridge the gap between what Sean is looking for, what Amy's looking for, what Randy's looking for, frankly, what all of us are looking for. How do you react to this, you know, this conversation and the challenge of an integrated, frankly, student, right?
So yeah, that was exactly what I would like to at least, you know, have a couple, you know, sentences on top of, because I really enjoyed this the conversation. And one thing about this, let's say, modular design, or whether it's just code library or there's some other part of that are modular, and I see, I mean, like in my own term, it's more like an encapsulated knowledge, like problem set. So the solution to certain problems, and when you do program, you try to break down these problems into smallest part, so we can actually solve those smaller problems instead of dealing with like big problem like what is beauty kind of. I cannot answer it, so I can definitely see the value of this like code libraries, like manufacturing process, like encapsulated into smaller pieces, whether it's just a code or actual like instruction or some part of the system. So, and at the same time, what Amy talked about is, let's say we need this platform to work on. And let's say in my position, like somewhere in the middle, trying to educate my students in both ways, we have this accumulated knowledge, like a couple centuries, I don't know. And if we can just reuse it in an easier way from these modular systems, like from each module is a chunk of information cleaned up by experts, software engineers, designers, and everything. And these are very expensive asset we have. At the same time, my students, like for example, need to work on this like certain kind of platform. I'm pretty sure, 100% sure that Autodesk can supply that. And there can be other firms, but like I am 100% sure they can do that. So in between these, like this chunk of knowledge that had been accumulated over multiple centuries about buildings and construction and design all at the same time, but still these students need to know how to utilize the module of information on top of certain kind of technical platform. To be able to do that, they need to at least be able to read and write in terms of code, even if they're not going to be software engineers.
Yeah.
But still, they need to know how to use these digital platforms, the infrastructure. And I like to say all this data and modular systems, patterns, coded or not coded, all at the same time. And at the same time, like, where are we standing on? There's got to be some kind of infrastructure system that's not really physical. Right. So we can actually make some physical things and just think about materials and fun forms and stuff like that. So I consider myself like somewhere in the middle. And I'm trying both way actually to understand what's gonna be the best business for me as an educator / researcher and sometimes designer.
That's the best thing for your students. I just want to answer what you just asked. So my modular friend up there doing his modular units, like and Randy, you can literally, your students can become productizers and work in the world of physicality. And for guys like that, they can use computational design to productize what he's offering and put it on the connected platform at Autodesk. Or they can be designers utilizing those pieces and parts and working with customers like him to also productize, or owners to understand the parameters of the products they want to use. The students have the world as their oyster right now because every part of the ecosystem needs their skill set that you're talking about. It's like chicken and the egg. We don't design with products because there aren't products that have been defined. You have to define products and then we can use them and then we have to buy them. And there needs to be a platform that allows you to connect those designers and makers and operators together. So I think for you, it's super exciting that the foundational skills of anything you're teaching with like the software and the computational design, and then tying it in with, craftsmanship that informs what the product will be, is like they have everything for them if you're young in this space.
Absolutely. And I think to extend on what I said earlier, Amy, I think I, stroke a little fire in you, but It comes from, when I started my career 23 years ago as an architect, I was starting at the digital age at essentially, I think it was Autodesk 10 or 12 or somewhere in there. And it was really where CAD was becoming the norm. It was where everyone was drafting with Corm. I was one of the first in my class of graduates to become really fluent at it. And I was doing 3D before anyone was even doing 2D drawings and things of that sort. But I never lost the edge of being that student, of understanding how a building actually goes together. But I did see a lot of students that were coming out depending on that and doing a lot of cut and paste and a lot of plugging in and never fully grasping, how the building actually goes together, how the things need to function, how they need to operate. And so that's where I come from. It's from that experience and that fear of a generation that doesn't fully understand how the thing actually gets put together and gets built. And I think even if you're doing modular, you're doing productized, you're doing any aspect of what we're talking about here, the architect, the engineer, they still need to understand that at the end of the day. And from that learning standpoint, understand how something gets built.
From a designer's point of view, let's say if we say modules, we would like to have options.
Yeah.
So like what he's doing may be different from someone else is doing, but like we still would like to have this big set of options as a designer. Right. So we can somehow combine this and that and from a different set and just to explore that's another dimension, the next step when we have enough of this kit of parts, the chunk of information is already cleaned up and all solved inside, and I think that's the more we have, the better for let's say future designers.
So let me just call time. We've got about 5-6 minutes left, and the last question that I want to hit you guys with, and it's all a part of what we've been discussing this whole time. But again, Sora is at that educational level for a whole new generation of professionals that we'll all be working with, even before we go fishing or buy or shopping or whatever we're going to do in 10 or 15 or 20 years, right? From Sean, your perspective, Amy and Randy, for that new grad or that student who just, whether it's a freshman in architecture, engineering, construction, frankly, but we're talking about architects today, what does he or she need to be looking for? What would you be looking for in that new professional that just came out of Texas Tech, for instance? What are you looking for out of that student, right? And Randy, I'd like to start with you, and then we'll go Amy and Sean.
Well, it's I initially say a curiosity in general, but it's just so exciting to have somebody new that's not biased with the industry already, right? To have that open mind that sees so many possibilities that we just think, oh, we've always done it this way, right? And so I know last year we had a class of 30 interns that started the summer during COVID. We kept all of our interns and we set them out with a challenge that they worked in every geography around, figure out how do we prefab more? How do we move more work offsite and into manufacturing? And we just formed them into two groups. They worked together, and the whole time they just were interviewing and talking to people, but they thought of things different. They had a presentation at the end. I just wanted to see what they said, just to have that fresh mind, right? And, a lot of it is, and Amy spoke to it earlier, it's like, what's your readiness? What's your culture, and to be able to have young, fresh students that come in with a technology perspective into this industry is just golden. I'm just excited about all of them.
Excellent. How about you, Amy?
I think I'll just, again, be controversial. I think the question you should be asking us is, what do we need to do in our companies to start attracting kids that she's educating? Because you could actually get these great kids and squish them like bugs on the first day based on some of the information that goes around in this place. So honestly, and by the way, don't take anything I say as an affront to any of your companies. I just want the reality of the today situation and the expectations to be understood. And I want everybody to evolve. That's why there's a framework for transformation. We can't talk as if we're at the physical and digital reuse today when we're not. And I think that's very dangerous. I think we have to really be real about where we are today. And that's okay, because we all have to partner to get to the next part of the transformation journey. That we have to start asking us, how are we as a company going to listen, and learn from these students that are being educated on things that we have no concept of. None. And by the way, that we can't even see ourselves in the future of it. It's when your 12-year-old teaches you how to learn TikTok and you're like, this is the dumbest app ever. And then all of a sudden you're like, this is the greatest app ever. Like 3 months from then, you can't get off TikTok. You know what I mean? Like we're the people that like think TikTok, we should stop our kids from using it. You know, like we're still there. I think we haven't embraced it.
And I agree with what Amy said too. It's like, how do you bring new bright minds in and not squish them? Right? And say, nope, this is the way we've always done it. This is our culture. You know, we're going to, crush you if you fail instead of open up. And what means do you have within your company to really foster that kind of creativity and technology and growth instead of squishing it?
It's interesting because we talk a lot about millennials because they're such a big group of generation in our industry now, and then Gen Z coming after that. But if any of you listening have a child 0 I think to 6 or 7 years old, you have an alpha now. The alphabet started over, and the alphas and a lot of the science behind that generation believe that it's not the iPad doing things, it's them doing things to make the iPad work and move, right? So in one experiment, 2-year-olds, when the iPad was taken away from them, touched magazines and touched themselves to see if they were working. When that generation hits our industry and says, what do you mean I can't fly? What do you mean I can't go to the moon? What do you mean I can't use digital and modular? You've got literally 10 seconds to convince them that they can and you can and we can, right? So we think we're all like, in consternation about quote millennials now and maybe Gen Z. This is the appetizer to, I think, what's coming generationally for us. So I think it's all good, but I think we have no clue. Sean, tell me what you're looking for in that student. And frankly, to Amy and Randy's point, how do you get them?
I think it's exactly that. I think we're looking for the creativity, the open mindset, looking and understanding that they learn on a different platform. My kids were using iPhones and iPads at 1.5 years old, just because it's natural to them. And I think that's the difference in the students coming out. For me, the CAD generation, I had to learn it. I had to really study it, and I had to go through it. To them, it's like second nature, getting on a computer. And so I think the more that we support that, the more that we can enhance that and provide them the space to grow, the more we're all going to improve across. And I think to Amy's comments is that, with that digital platform and being able to provide that, and the more that we allow them the freedom, the more growth we're going to have in improving all those aspects and growing the industry as a whole and being able to track. I agree with her. We're not there today. We're not there to track every little thing. We're not there to identify it, but we are working towards that. And I think it's improving every day that we're doing it. And I think it's this younger generation is going to bring us to a next level. As we talk about the technology and the growth of technology and how quick, what took 6 months last year now takes 6 weeks, and so on and so on. I think it's the same with our students and their technological mindset and how they can enhance us in the next generation. And so I think that's something that we need to encourage. It's something that we need to support, and it's something that we need to provide the means for that growth and openness for them to do so. It's going to help us all improve. I think as architects and contractors and builders across the industry, we are one of the oldest professions in the world. And so we need to grow past that. I think there was, when I was coming into it, as architecture being the second oldest profession in the world behind lawyers, believe it or not. I'm
not sure that's actually right in your let's go with it for now.
It's one of those things, it's definitely debatable, but so as we look at that, though, when I came into the industry, it was always that old architect. It was always that old mindset of, you're doing it this way because that's the way I had to do it, even with my old college professors and all that. And I got so sick of hearing that. I got so tired of hearing that. And we need to break that. We just need to break that. We need to look at new ways. We need to look at new ways to do things. We need to take that younger generation and listen to them. It may not always be good. It may not always be right, but there's something there. There's something to build on. There's something that we can all learn from. No matter what generation that we're coming from.
I agree with you. And I think that we can't afford not to listen to them, because they'll leave us and go find another place that will, right?
Yes.
So super important.
Well, thank you all very much. I know we're out of time, and I sincerely, that's a perfect way of ending the conversation, especially for all of those students out there at Texas Tech and many other universities that we know and love, and we want to be, coming our way sooner than later, because by goodness, we need you all, all the great minds, all the creativity. And thank you, Randy. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Sora. Thank you, Sean, for just a healthy debate and an awesome conversation. Man, you knocked it out of the park, and I'm just humbled to be a part of it. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, everybody, for being a part of this and staying tuned with us. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Randy Herron with TD Industries. You may have caught me on the previous panel, which was fantastic. So if you haven't seen that, please make sure you do. But I'm just going to spend a little bit of time digging in a little bit deeper to DFMA, which stands for Design for Manufacturing and Assembly, and telling you just a little bit more about how TD Industries is incorporating DFMA into our current and future strategic plans. So TD, just so you know, is a 75-year-old mechanical services and facility services company. I think we were listed as number 32 on ENR's 2019 list of top specialty contractors. So we're pretty substantial in size, and we've been around for a long time. And we're really saying, in our 75-year history, looking back, the future of construction, the next 15 years, in even further into the future, is going to be a lot different than our journey has been so far. And so, what is our major leverage for the future? What are we going to do to really be in step with the changes that are coming for the construction industry? And one of the things that we're looking at leveraging is DFMA, which, if you were part of the previous panel and heard that, DFMA is Design for Manufacturing and Assembly. So it's fundamentally designing manufacturing, design assembly into your model. So at TD, we have a group of BIM designers. We have about 60 of them, and they work within Revit. And so what we're doing is taking those 60 designers along with the input of our project teams and our engineers internally and saying, how can we look at our projects differently? How can we really leverage the model, the Revit model for manufacturing? We've always had a manufacturing shop, or at least for the last 40 or so years. And we work hard to prefabricate as much as we can on our projects. But if we really leverage and lean into DFMA, how can we productize and, maybe modularize some of our components to really take prefab to the next level? To do that, we have to design it into the model. And so taking DFMA apart a little bit more, design for manufacturing, we just spoke of, how do I look at the model and design it to manufacture more? But the A part of DFMA is assembly. How can I design my systems so that they're easier to assemble on site? Because construction is a very risky career, very risky business to be in. There's a lot of unknowns, but how can you take some of those unknowns out of the equation by really leveraging DFMA, leveraging prefabrication and productization to move work off-site and into manufacturing, so that you increase the productivity from being in a manufacturing environment. You increase the safety from being in a manufacturing environment. And also, how do you make it easier to assemble on the job site? While you're doing that and you're thinking about ease of assembly, you're transferring the work that traditionally would have been done on site, moving it into manufacturing, reducing those man hours on site where it is more risky, more unsafe conditions, more unknowns. And by really leveraging that DFMA, we're able to increase certainty, and it's certainty in safety, in time, and in pricing. And so just to give you a little bit of a more idea of how we use DFMA internally and externally, for our internal customers, which are the job sites, for our men and women in the field, our superintendents, our foremen, and our tradesmen and women, what we do is we work with them up front with our BIM designers to say, okay, how can we do more? how can we fabricate more for you? And through that, we've established standards internally with certain ways that we build certain products from job to job, no matter the project, and what we also call productization. So in the plumbing business, the bank of restrooms, let's say in a commercial building, there'll be a line of water closets. The plumbing that hooks up those water closets, we call plumbing batteries. So how do we make sure, how can we, for an ease of manufacturer standpoint, do all plumbing batteries in about the same way? So we're creating a product out of that instead of having, as Amy Marks called it in the previous panel discussion, stop creating snowflakes. How can we make that particular plumbing battery the same from job to job to job? Even though we may have more water closets than we did on the previous one, the quantity can change, but the structure and the build of the infrastructure of that battery is the same. So it's really creating products or productizing our work. And so as we look across, all of what we do from a mechanical and plumbing standpoint, we can productize pump skids, like I said, plumbing batteries, multi-trade fabrication, even VAV box connections. There are things that can be consistently built from job to job. And so that really in turn helps us become, more manufacturing principles to incorporate into our build to, again, increase that certainty. The other thing that's kind of shifting is as I said, the next 15 years of construction is going to be a lot different than the previous 15 years and earlier even, is really, our traditional build cycle has been for our external customer to be the general contractor. And that's really shifting over time as we're seeing owners becoming more and more involved, especially the serial owners that build nationally or globally. They're looking at the way that they build and they're saying, how can we productize our building so that we get the same level of quality in every geography that we build, and even maybe the same efficiencies by productizing their buildings. Those efficiencies give them some certainty, right? So certainty in cost and certainty in schedule, which is really important to the owners. So they're looking to partner with mechanical subcontractors, electricians, and others to componentize or modularize, or even if you want to think of it like building Lego blocks of mechanical systems that can be utilized interchangeably from project to project. So currently we're starting to work with owners that are working, like I said, to modularize the design of the mechanical systems for their buildings. We're also working with equipment vendors. As they're productizing their offerings, they need parts and pieces of the mechanical system that makes it easier for hookup. So where in the past we only did that on our projects, we're starting to get equipment vendors coming to us and saying, help us scale this nationally. How can we ship out the hookups as part of the equipment that we're sending out? One of the other things that we're also doing that's a little bit different from the past is that we're working with other trade contractors. As other trade contractors are modularizing their offerings and working with other owners specifically, sometimes they need some parts and pieces to the mechanical or plumbing systems. And we're starting to partner up with them and see how we can work really well together. As we look to the future to really leverage DFMA, the important things that we need is a really strong construction technology team to help link our model to manufacturing and really start gathering that data. So a few years ago, we invested heavily in a database of all of our parts and pieces. So we utilize that database to estimate, to model, to fabricate with. So that now that we can start getting data that's more specific and more exact, so that we can start leveraging that to really understand our cost more, as we productize, to really leverage that cost model into manufacturing and to be able to give that information to our owners and to be able to be great partners with them in the future. So over the last few years, we've really leaned into the construction technology side. We've made some heavy investments and attracted some really top-rated construction technology talent within the industry. And that's what we're using to really leverage the model to manufacture, increase certainty and price along this life cycle. So in conclusion, as we look forward, as TD Industries looks forward to the future of construction, a lot of the big bets that we're making right now are aligning leadership and strategy around DFMA, really leaning into our BIM modeling and manufacturing to say, how can we build different in the future to increase certainty in cost and certainty in schedule? And how can we partner with our internal customers and our external customers to create products that help us scale this? So how can we partner with internal customers and external customers to really leverage design for manufacturing to produce better products for the future? So I just want to close out today. It's been a great day. Y'all have heard from some really amazing thought leaders in the industry on topics such as DFMA. We're really excited that we had the opportunity to share these thoughts with you, and excited for the opportunity to share this experience with Texas Tech and the DLA. It's been great. I think you'll also see a rolling list of our sponsors at the end, but it's been my pleasure to speak with you, to be a part of the panel, and to be involved with the Texas Tech DLA. Thank you very much.